Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.
I'm Jesse Thorn. Lesley Manville is an actor. She got her start on TV back in the 70s. At the time, she was a teenager living in England. Then came her career in theater. She's been in many plays with the prestigious Royal Shakespeare Company. She's also been in many films. Mike Leigh became a fan of her stage work. She's been in a ton of his movies since. And she was nominated for an Oscar for her role in Phantom Thread. It's been some 40 years since she got started in the entertainment business, so you might think it's time to slow it down a little. Maybe relax on a beach somewhere, right?
In a Guardian interview recently, I kind of, in a rather extravagant way, said, I want to go out and dance till 3 a.m. and get drunk and drink too much and have sex, which is kind of, people have taken a bit literally. But I'm sort of making a point that, just because you are over 50, it doesn't mean that those feelings stop and that you don't want a good time, you don't want to misbehave. Some people think, oh, well, you're a 50-year-old woman. Should you really be dancing and getting sweaty and flirting? Hell yes, you should. And if you want to, you can do it.
It's Bullseye. You might know Lesley's work with the director Mike Leigh. She starred in some of his best movies, like Secrets and Lies, All or Nothing, and Another Year. Her latest is the BBC show Mum. In it, she plays Cathy, a mom in her 50s, living out in the suburbs. The show begins with Cathy getting over the recent death of her husband. The tone of the show and Lesley's performance are both very grounded, though sometimes she is surrounded by madness. A lot of Mum is about Lesley's character's relationship with her best friend, Michael. They have palpable romantic chemistry, but Lesley's son Jason isn't into the idea. He's still pretty protective of his late father. And he gets a bit jealous when he notices there might be something going on between his mom and his dad's pal. In this clip, Cathy and Jason are chatting after a dinner party wraps up. Cathy maybe has had a few too many drinks.
A little bit giggly, wasn't I?
Just a bit.
And then I fell asleep.
Oh, you were fast asleep on the sofa.
Oh, God.
Well, actually, last night, the really funny thing was you fell asleep on Michael.
How do you mean?
Well, we were watching the film, and you fell asleep with your head on Michael's shoulder.
Did I?
Yeah, not like you.
Oh, dear.
Everyone saw it. You think Michael would have moved or something? But he just sat there.
Did he?
Yeah.
Weird.
Well, Lesley, I'm so happy to have you on Bullseye. Thank you for coming in and doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
One of the things that I enjoy the most about Mum is you and Peter Mullen, the protagonists of the show, both radiate kindness and warmth. And it's a very muted, quiet show for a sitcom. Mm-hmm. And everyone else is a monster. Just act like monsters.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, they do. I think that was the point, that, you'd have this calm centre to it with these people that the audience can really relate to, and particularly with Cathy, see the other people around her through her eyes and their ridiculousness and their characteristics, which sometimes are very challenging. But yeah, it is this sweet couple who have slowly, over the 3 seasons that we've done, fallen in love with each other. And it's a very nice love story.
Are you as patient as your character, Cathy, on Mum?
Hell no. I'm far more judgmental than Cathy is. Yeah, no, I find it hard to button my mouth. I really do, in all walks of my life. So, there are a lot of similarities. I hope people think I'm kind and all of those things, but patient, no.
You left general education in your mid-teens, right? 15 or 16, something like that?
15, yeah.
Had you already then decided to be an actor?
No, I was a very good classical singer. And since the age of about 8 or 9, I was trained classically. And I really did have an exceptional voice. And I think if I'd have taken that course, which would have been a very natural course to take, I would have moved into opera easily.
How did you figure out that that was the case when you were 8 or 9 years old? Was it like singing in church or something like that?
Well, I did actually go to a church school, but and so I did sing in the choir and I did sing a lot of solos. My father had a very good voice, so there was always singing at home, and my middle sister sang as well. So there was a lot of singing going on, and when I went to have singing lessons, the teachers that I had were getting me to sing more complicated stuff and Mozart, and so it became apparent early on that I had this good voice. But, I didn't grow up in a middle-class household. We were working class. We weren't poor, but we were working class. My father did all sorts of jobs, and my mother stayed at home and looked after the three of us. But nobody did take me to the opera. So I made a really ill-informed decision that it was boring, having not seen it ever, having never seen an opera in my life.
I'm going to be frank with you. I worked at the San Francisco Opera when I was a teenager. I was 16, 17 years old. Mm-hmm. I don't think you would have found it not boring at the time. I can't promise you, based on my experience as a 16-year-old at the opera.
There must be a lot of 15, 16-year-olds that do see it and do want to go and study it, because by the time they're 20, they're doing it. But, for me, it was... It just wasn't rock and roll for me, at all. So I thought, well, look, I have got this good voice. I could use it. I could do musicals. So I sort of said to my mum and dad, look, I grew up in Brighton, which is on the south coast of England. I said, I really want to go to a stage school in London, which is a kind of odd place where you can go from 4. And you do general education in the morning and then singing, dancing, acting in the afternoon. Well, I left school at 15 to go to this stage school with the idea that I would continue my education in the mornings, and I did. But the education was not good, so I didn't end up sitting any exams or doing any of the things that the friends I'd left behind in Brighton were doing. So I actually don't have a qualification to my name, so thank God I can act. But the singing and dancing and acting teaching was very good, and I learnt to dance with a great choreographer called Arlene Phillips. I was singing, and I met a really good acting teacher who I'm still friends with now. And I was only there for about 9 months or so, and then I left, and my first job was a musical in the West End directed by John Schlesinger, the late film director, who was making a very rare foray into musical theatre. And then I did all sorts of odd jobs. I was presenting a bit. I was doing pantomime, which is a thing we have in England. It's a Christmas show. I was doing a bit of acting here and there, but it was mostly musical stuff. I did a lunchtime soap for a while, which was really interesting learning curve, because we shot most of it outside on proper single camera film, which was quite rare for television. Anyway, that said, cut to 6 years later, and I'd had a very happy 6 years just bumbling around, doing lots of different jobs, enjoying myself, earning a bit of money. And then I met Mike Leigh, and then it all kind of changed, really, because we just got on like a house on fire, and he made me see that I could play people that weren't like me, and that made me more happy than anything. And I loved the way he worked, and the fact that, to get to an end result of a script, we'd get to that point by many improvisations and creating characters and all of that. And I just loved it, and it made sense to me. I thought, if I'm going to play somebody real, I need to create them from scratch and fill out all their background and all of this stuff. So it really got into my bones, and working with him then at that very formative time, it was like the first film I did with him was made for the BBC, and it was called Grown Ups. And when it went out, despite the fact I'd been acting for about 6 or 7 years by then, it was like I was a new kid on the block, because the kind of work I'd been doing before that, nobody'd really noticed. But suddenly here I was with this prestigious director and doing this great film that was on the BBC. And, you know, after that, my career just got more and more interesting and went from strength to strength.
It seems to me like a lot to go off and do all that stuff on your own as a teenager. You know, particularly if you don't already have a lot of grounding in that world. I mean, having grown up outside London in a non-show business family. I have a buddy that grew up in Sherman Oaks, California here. When I got to college and became my friend. His parents are screenwriters, and his neighbor as a child was Bryan Cranston. And to him, working in show business is normal.
Yes.
And he still does. He does now. But like, I went to an art school as a teenager. I couldn't conceive that it could be a thing you did for your life. Like, maybe I could kind of imagine regional theater. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, when I went to stage school, I really just loved it. I mean, I was still living at home in Brighton, and it's about an hour's commute on the train every day. So I was travelling backwards and forwards, but I loved it. I felt I'd found my groove. I mean, I was quite shy. I mean, there were a lot of girls there that were very jazz hands and loved performing, and they were very big characters. And I wasn't any of those things. But I always was the quiet one, really. But I suppose when I did feel, I know that when I did feel a bit lost and a bit alone was when I started working. And I wasn't working in London, which I was beginning to get to know, and I wasn't working near home in Brighton. I was all over the place, all over the country. And I was really quite alone then, and that was difficult. 16 years old, fending for myself. There was a programme I did in the southwest of England, which was like a kids' show, but I was presenting it. So I'd film all these extracts during the week, going to a zoo, talking to the zookeeper, and then we'd go into the studio once a week and we'd record the show live. I don't know if you have a comparison show here, but that was the nature of the show. It's kind of a magazine programme for kids. And I loved doing the show, but nobody there looked after me at all. And in hindsight, it was shocking that nobody took care of me. And I was staying in a really not very nice hotel, which back in when was this then? This was the mid-late 70s. It was all a bit seedy, and it was full of travelling salesmen in terrible smelly suits and blokes and men who would look at me at breakfast. And it was really not very comfortable. And there were no mobile phones, cell phones. There were no TVs in the room. I mean, it was basic. And I was lonely and finding places to eat on my own in the evenings when restaurants were not really a thing, and certainly not 16-year-old girls going out on their own to eat. But, I did it. So I suppose it gave me backbone, and it gave me an absolute sense of myself. And I think that it's been really good that I had all of that. I mean, it wasn't always great at the time, but it's kind of made me. I don't take any mess from anybody. And I know that those years of my life were really formative, until I got in my mid-20s and got myself somewhere to live in London and got more settled. Those early days of travelling around so young and were hard.
So what were the circumstances of you meeting the filmmaker Mike Leigh, with whom you've worked so many times in the decades since?
Well, the circumstances were kind of odd. I was doing a play in London for the Royal Shakespeare Company. I wasn't doing Shakespeare because they don't just do Shakespeare. I was doing a new modern play. And Mike had been asked to go to the Royal Shakespeare and do a play. But for various reasons, he had to cast it, economic reasons, I guess, he had to cast it from within the current company. And I don't think I was an obvious candidate. I, as I said, prior to meeting him, I was kind of a one-trick pony. I
read him describe what you had done to that point as playing nice ladies like yourself or something like that.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely right. That is the bottom line. I played, sweet, nice-looking girls, squeaky clean, and that was me. Anyway, he asked me to do this play, and I don't think he thought I was going to be a great Mike Leigh candidate, really. I think he thought it was going to be a bit hard work with me. But once we started doing it, as I said just now, I just thought this was amazing, and I loved it, and I was good at it. And he was the first person, after being an actor for about 7 years by that point, he said to me, "You're really very good at this." And the sense of achievement that I had and the thrill of him saying that to me was huge. So the play actually, for reasons which we don't need to waste time talking about now, actually never happened. So he said, "Well, look, I think you better come and work with me again." And then we did, in the days when he was mostly making films for the BBC and Channel 4, we made Grown Ups.
Before we come back, in a minute, Lesley and I talk about her work in Mike Leigh's Another Year. It's Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor Smart Water. Smart Water is for the curious drinkers, the ones who are always looking for ways to make things a little better. That's why Smart Water created 2 new ways to hydrate. Smart Water Alkaline with 9+ pH and Smart Water Antioxidant with added selenium. And now you can order Smart Water by saying, "Alexa, order Smart Water." Smart Water. That's pretty smart.
To restore your faith in humanity, get the StoryCorps podcast from NPR. Uninterrupted conversations between real people about the things that matter most. This season, we're hearing from LGBTQ voices and what life was like before Stonewall, from lesser-known victories to conversations across generations. Listen to all 12 episodes now.
We are the hosts of My Brother, and Me, and now, nearly 10 years into our podcast, the secret can be revealed. All the clues are in place, and the world's greatest treasure hunt can now begin.
Embedded in each episode of My Brother, and Me is a micro clue that will lead you to 14 precious gemstones all around this big, beautiful blue world of ours.
So start combing through the episodes. Let's say starting at episode 101 on.
Yeah, the early episodes are pretty problematic, so there's no clues in those episodes.
No, not at all.
The better ones, the good ones, clues ahoy.
Listen to every episode repeatedly in sequence. Laugh if you must, but mainly get all the great clues. My Brother, and Me. It's an advice show, kind of, but a treasure hunt, mainly. Anywhere you find podcasts or treasure maps. My Brother, and Me. The hunt is on.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. I'm talking with the great Lesley Manville. You might know her from many of director Mike Leigh's movies. She stars as Cathy in the TV show Mum. The 3rd and final series of episodes is out now on the BBC and on their streaming service, BritBox. Now, he is very well known for his unusual method of making films and theater, which often involves developing characters and a story with the cast through, in part, improvisation. Mm-hmm. Had you improvised before you started working with him?
Only at stage school a little bit, but not really, not extensively. And it was never to do with it coming out of a character that you'd created. I mean, when you work with Mike, you don't just kind of day one start improvising. I mean, you spend many weeks creating a character that you're just talking about and chewing over with each one-to-one. And then you start improvising, and even then it's on your own. You don't start suddenly improvising with people. So with him, I kind of realized that, of course, I always used to find improvising without Mike a bit of a waste of time, because, and subsequent people that I worked with, after having done a few jobs with Mike, used to think, oh, you're good at improvising. Come on, let's try and make this scripted play that doesn't work very well at this point. Let's improvise it and see what... And of course, it's nonsense, because all you're doing is thinking what to say. So nothing can be trusted. Nothing's coming from an organic place. You're just trying to think of what to say. And of course, with Mike, what's imperative is that you thoroughly and wholly create these characters, and then very slowly, I mean, you're just, a whole day just walking around as them, not saying anything. Then you might just you have mock-ups of wherever they live or where they work, and you slowly start to bring them to life. And eventually there'll be other characters in the piece that he'll bring you together with that you might be related to or having a friendship or marriage with, whatever. And you fill out all of that backstory, and then you'll start to do some improvisations, but there's never any pressure. In fact, it's absolutely crucial that you don't try and make the improvisations interesting, because then you're not going to discover anything. And I've done very long improvisations with him, where not a lot happens. But through those, he starts to see where tensions are, where relationships are floundering, or where a relationship is good. I've done 4, 5, 6 hour improvisations where you might an hour of that might be spent with your characters sitting watching TV and not saying anything.
That's terrifying to me.
Yeah, but you haven't done the work that precedes it to get you to the place where
you're
you
being
actually
presumptive,
feel
but in this case, you're
comfortable. Right. But that, of course, if somebody said to me tomorrow, okay, we're going to do this piece and you're going to be there, so let's start improvising, I'd be terrified, because that is what I was saying just now. All you're doing is thinking of what to say. Whereas if there's no pressure of to be entertaining, it kind of takes care of itself because of the work you've done.
I want to play a scene from a Mike Leigh movie in which you starred. And I'm going to be honest, we've only got a certain amount of time here. I could just play clips of your performances in Mike Leigh movies for the rest of the time we're here. I would be happy about that. I'd be perfectly glad to just sit here and enjoy your performances in Mike Leigh movies. But we picked one called Another Year that came out about a decade ago.
Yeah.
And I was walking back to my car after having eaten lunch today. And I was thinking to myself, and this is, don't ask me to defend it, but I do sincerely believe it. I was thinking to myself, I don't know that I have ever seen a more, I can't even meet your gaze while I say this, but it's the honest truth. I don't know that I've ever seen a more compelling acting performance in a film than your performance in this film.
Well, thank you very much.
Which I found just to be a breathtaking movie. So in this movie, basically, there is this couple named Tom and Jerry who are in late middle age. And one of Jerry's co-workers is Mary, who you play. And she is spending time with them and trying to put up a facade of, of bonhomie. But it is very clear as the film unfolds that she is just desperately sad and lonely and probably an alcoholic.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And so I just want to play this scene from the movie. So this is my guest as Mary talking about her taste in men over a glass of wine with Jerry. And Mary says that she's never dated a man who would cook for her.
You could put an ad in the paper. Chef wanted.
Yeah. Chef/boyfriend required for gorgeous girl. No, mature woman with cat. No, mature-ish. We don't want to put them off, do we? Oh, it's really lovely the way you and Tom do everything together.
We're very lucky.
Yeah, you are. But you deserve it. You're both such lovely people.
Oops. My halo's slipping.
Yes, ain't Jerry? No, but I'm really comfortable with where I am in my life. As you know, I've got my lovely little garden flat, I've got a good job, I've got my health, touch wood, I've got my independence, I haven't got anybody telling me what to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not all rosy. I have good days and bad days like everyone else, don't I? But hey!
It is, I think it would be very easy for your performance or the film to just let her be pathetic or just let her be a joke. And it's a funny movie too.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. And I wonder what it was like to spend all that time developing and then embodying a character who is in some ways just defined by just crippling loneliness.
Yeah, it was. I think that film stayed with me. I don't mean on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I didn't go home and cry into my pillow because I was playing Mary. But that woman stayed with me. Her predicament, her pain. Because so many people said to me when they'd seen the film that they'd been like that at times in their life, or they knew people that were like that, or people that were like that and were still like that. And I sort of think that for me she was the most complete piece of work that I did with Mike, really. When we were doing what became big parts of the film, like, for example, the scene when she arrives late to their barbecue.
We've saved you some food, Mary. I hope it's still warm.
Oh, thanks, Jerry. Oh, yeah, it'll be fine.
Well, there's some fresh if you like.
Oh, no, Tom, don't worry about me.
So you didn't get arrested then, Mary?
No, I didn't, Joe. He was very kind to me, actually.
What CC is your car?
What do you mean?
How big's the engine?
Oh, I don't know. It's about this big, I think. What's so funny?
Don't be cruel.
It means how powerful is it, Mary? How many cubic centimetres is it?
Oh.
You should know that.
On the back there's numbers like 1.6 or 1.9.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, well, that's boy stuff, isn't it?
It's not important.
No, Tanya. I think I'm going to have a cigarette before I eat this.
Excuse me, I'll get out of your way.
Shall we take Isaac over there?
Okay.
Oh, well, I thought you wouldn't mind because we're outside.
No, we don't, Mary. You carry on.
You're all right, you're all right.
I mean, we did that as a major improvisation that lasted the best part of the day, really. So, you know, for Mary, it would start in her flat, getting ready, you know, all of that. And I remember this very well, and I don't remember lots of things, but this I remember very well. That Mary used to listen to a lot of sad Dusty Springfield, and she used to sing along to it quite well, which was good because, you know, I mean, I've got a bit of a voice on me, and I thought, actually, I'm going to use it. Mary can have quite a good voice. She's belting out this, and she sort of loved the loneliness in a perverse way. You know, she loved singing the Dusty Springfield and crying and using that as an excuse to go and get another glass of wine. And even though she knew she had to drive across London, because then she arrives in this car that she's got, and the car is everything's chaos with her, chaos. Nothing is ordered, and that's really not like me. I'd never played somebody drunk before, and we did a few scenes where she was drunk, and that, oddly enough, it was the only time, and I'd shared this with Mike. I said the really thing I'm finding really tricky is that normally, you know, you do the scene, you come out of character, you go and have your lunch, and you come back and you do it again, whatever. But when I was doing the drunk Mary, I sort of needed to stay in that zone. I found going in and out of drunk very tricky. So he said, that's all right, you know, just we'll find a little place for you to go and keep it on the go. And I did. And it really helped. But there was a lot about playing her. And I think over the years some people have misinterpreted this, that it meant that, you know, I was lonely, or I was, you know, in some sort of pain. And we've all been in pain in our lives and lonely at times. But I I really knew how to play her. I brought a lot to those scenes when she was desperate, and it kind of was an extension. It was like going to places beyond where Lesley had been, but I knew the route. So yeah, if I had we have a show in England called Desert Island Discs, you might be familiar with. My Desert Island disc of my movies would be Mary. Because there's something so wonderful about her as well, that she isn't just totally pitiful, and she puts on she wants to present something to the world that is positive. You know, she hasn't completely thrown in the towel. She clings to. She's going to claw herself back up, you know, or try to.
And she's beloved too. I mean, like that's another thing about the film, is that she wouldn't be there even in that state if those friends didn't love her.
Yes, I mean they do eventually get rather irritated because she's interrupting the kind of order and family stability of their life. You know, here's this tornado that turns up on a Sunday, and behaves quite badly at times, especially towards their son and his new girlfriend.
You know, one of the themes that movie shares with Mum is kind of engaging with the question of what are the possibilities and lack of possibilities of late middle age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that, another year feels like this story of contrasts of these people who are engaging that part of their lives in very different ways.
Mm.
You know, Mum is about someone who has both like learned to be generous with everyone around her and is also being generous with herself about starting a new thing, having lost her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And another year feels like a really deep, at least felt to me when I watched it, like a very deep engagement of the tragedy of late middle age, which is that you don't always get to make a new choice. You don't always get to open up a new road.
No. I mean, obviously, Mary in another year was about 10 years ago, so I was 10 years younger. So there was something more desperate about Mary. And you're right, those comparisons are absolutely spot on. But she was, you know, the ship had sailed to have a child, and she was just a different personality. You know, she desperately wanted to cling on to her youth and her looks, and you know, she dressed, some would say, some would not, but she probably dressed a bit inappropriately for her age, and she wasn't very sophisticated. She wasn't embracing getting older, and which she could have done. You know, she was not a bad looking woman. She was just desperately clinging on and really totally misjudging the situation with her friend's son, who she seriously thought she could get into some kind of relationship, and that he would find her attractive and want to be with her. And it's not that she wasn't attractive, but it was that there was no way this stable young man was going to be attracted by this totally chaotic, alcoholic, desperate woman. And what's different about Cathy and Mum is that she has had a full and fulfilled life. She was married to a man who she had a good relationship with. She had love. She's had a child. She does a nice job. She works in a children's school. You know, it's all gentle, positive things. So her reevaluation of her life post the death of her husband is a very different scenario. But what I love about Mum, and I think one of the reasons why it's been received so enthusiastically and brilliantly, certainly in the UK thus far, is that it looks at people over 50, over 60, who are just forming a love affair. You know, that part of their lives is not shut off and done with. And I think a lot of women are very happy to see something like that portrayed, that they feel they're being represented. And also that, you know, as I've said in the press before, in a slightly exaggerated way, because I'm trying to make a point, you know, in a Guardian interview recently, I kind of, in a rather extravagant way, said, I want to go out and dance till 3 a.m. and get drunk and drink too much and have sex, you know, which is kind of, people have taken a bit literally. But I'm sort of making a point that, you know, just because you are over 50, it doesn't mean that those feelings stop and that you don't want a good time, you don't want to misbehave. You know, some people think, oh, well, you're a 50-year-old woman. Should you really be dancing and getting sweaty and flirting? Hell yes, you should. And if you want to, you can do it. I mean, Cathy's not like that. Obviously, she's much more well-behaved, and she wouldn't even think that she would go out and get drunk. She'd probably stay at home and get drunk, but she might not want to go dancing like I do. But it's just, you know what I'm saying. Isn't it great that... like Fleabag is about a woman of a very different generation, but you know, who's the great thing about that show is that she doesn't care, you know, that anything goes, and that the show has shown a woman of that age not caring. It's just breaking some glass ceilings, really.
Well, Lesley Manville, thank you so much for being on Bullseye. It's so great to get to talk to you.
Thank you. It's been really nice talking to you too.
Lesley Manville, everyone. She stars as Cathy on Mum, which you can watch on BritBox here in the United States. And if you haven't seen Another Year by Mike Leigh, it's one of my favorite films and truly exceptional and extraordinary performance by Lesley Manville. Of course, she is, as they say, good in everything. That's the end of another episode of Bullseye. Bullseye is produced at MaximumFun.org World Headquarters overlooking MacArthur Park in beautiful Los Angeles, California, where this week it drizzled for 10 glorious seconds before the 90-degree weather started up again. It was a nice 10 seconds, though. The show is produced by Speaking Into Microphones. Our producer is Kevin Ferguson. He's taking care of a baby, so Raghu Manavalan stepped in for him this week. Jesus Ambrosio is our associate producer. We have help from Casey O'Brien here in the office, and our production fellow is Jordan Cowling. Our interstitial music is by DJ W, also known as Dan Wally. Thanks to Dan for sharing it with us. Hey, Dan, I interviewed E40. Our theme song is Huddle Formation by the Go Team. Thanks to them and their label Memphis Industries for letting us use that. They're good folks. And before you go, there are decades of Bullseye episodes for you to listen to in our archives. If you're a fan of hip-hop veterans, for example, why not check out my conversation with Master Ace? Check out my interview with Big Boy from Outkast. How about that? Lots of great hip-hop in the Bullseye archives. You can find our archives at MaximumFun.org, which is our website. You can also find them in your podcast app. Just subscribe to Bullseye with Jesse Thorn and, scroll backwards. You can also find the last few years' worth of shows on YouTube in the Bullseye with Jesse Thorn channel. And I think that's about it. Just remember, all great radio hosts have a signature sign-off.
Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.